The African sun beat down mercilessly on the savanna, baking the tall grasses a crispy gold. In a burrow beneath the shade of a sprawling baobab tree, Rabbit twitched his whiskers and yawned extravagantly. His stomach rumbled impatiently. It was breakfast time. He hopped out of his burrow, blinking in the sudden brightness. A sweet, tempting aroma tickled his nose. He spotted a magnificent mango tree in the distance, its branches sagging under the weight of 100 ripe, juicy fruits. Rabbit's mouth watered. Mangoes, his favorite. But as he started his hoppy journey towards the tree, a booming voice echoed across the savanna, shattering the peaceful morning. "Hey there, Rabbit. Where do you think you're off to in such a hurry?" It was Hyena, his unwelcome neighbor, lumbering towards him with a gait that could only be described as menacing. Hyena's eyes were fixed on the mango tree, gleaming with avarice. "Those mangoes look like they'd be perfect for a hearty breakfast, wouldn't you say?" Rabbit gulped. Hyena loved mangoes just as much as he did, perhaps even more. But Rabbit knew better than to share his breakfast with the boisterous Hyena. Hyena's appetite was legendary, and Rabbit would be lucky to get a single pip after Hyena devoured the entire bounty. "Actually, Hyena," Rabbit said, trying to sound casual despite the knot of worry tightening in his stomach, "those mangoes seem a bit too high for a small fellow like me to reach. I was just heading to the watering hole for a refreshing drink before the day gets any hotter." Hyena snorted, a sound that resembled a malfunctioning bellows. "Don't try to play innocent with me, Rabbit. We both know those mangoes are calling your name. But fear not, I'm a generous soul. I won't steal your breakfast. How about a race? Whoever reaches the tree first gets the most mangoes." Rabbit hesitated. A race against Hyena? That didn't seem like the smartest idea. Hyena was built for speed, with long, powerful legs that could propel him across the savanna in a blur. But Rabbit had something Hyena lacked, a cunning mind and an intimate knowledge of the savanna's hidden pathways. He glanced at the prize, the mango tree, heavy with delicious fruit, then back at Hyena, a sly smile spreading across his whiskered face. "A race, you say?" Rabbit grinned, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "All right, Hyena. You're on." The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the savanna. Hyena roared with laughter, a sound that startled a nearby flock of birds into flight. "Ready, Slowpoke?" he bellowed, his powerful legs churning as he launched himself into a full sprint towards the tempting mangoes. Rabbit, however, remained perfectly still, his brown fur blending seamlessly with the dry grass. A mischievous glint twinkled in his eyes. He knew a much faster way to reach the mango tree than a straight-out race. Instead of following Hyena, Rabbit darted off in the opposite direction, disappearing into a maze of tall termite mounds. Hyena, confident in his speed, didn't bother looking back. He pounded across the savanna, kicking up dust with every powerful stride. But as he neared the mango tree, a nagging doubt began to gnaw at him. Why hadn't Rabbit even tried to keep up? Was he planning some sort of trick? Suddenly, a voice echoed from behind him, filled with mock surprise. "Oh dear, Hyena. It seems you've taken the wrong path." Hyena whirled around, his eyes widening in disbelief. There, perched on a lower branch of the mango tree, sat Rabbit, a juicy mango clutched triumphantly in his paws. He was already taking a large, satisfied bite. "What? How did you get there so fast?" Hyena roared, his frustration bubbling over. Rabbit chuckled, his whiskers twitching with amusement. "There's more to the savanna than meets the eye, my friend. While you were busy charging ahead like a bull in a china shop, I took a shortcut." He gestured vaguely towards the termite mounds. "Let's just say there's a network of tunnels beneath them that leads right to the roots of this very tree." Hyena gnashed his teeth, his powerful jaws snapping empty air. He couldn't believe he'd been outsmarted again. Just then, a mischievous idea popped into Rabbit's head. "You know, Hyena," he said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy, "you look a little winded. Why don't you rest here in the shade for a bit while I enjoy these delicious mangoes?" Hyena glared, his frustration battling with a growing sense of hunger. He looked at the juicy mangoes dangling just out of reach, then back at Rabbit's smug face. He knew he'd been outsmarted, but maybe there was still a way to salvage some breakfast. Hyena grumbled under his breath, a low rumble that vibrated through the ground like an approaching storm. He watched in begrudging silence as Rabbit happily devoured the ripe mangoes, savoring their sweet, juicy flesh. Hyena's stomach growled again, a loud, insistent sound that echoed across the savanna. All right, Rabbit, Hyena finally conceded, his voice dripping with defeat. "You win this round. But just this once. Tell me, how many of those mangoes are you planning on eating yourself?" Rabbit, with a mango half nestled in his cheek, paused for a thoughtful moment. "Well, Hyena," he said, his voice stretched with a hint of mischief, "these mangoes are quite large, and I wouldn't want to waste any. Perhaps I could eat just a few and then—" Before Rabbit could finish his sentence, Hyena's eyes lit up with a cunning glint. "Hold on a second," he interrupted, his voice suddenly eager. "You wouldn't happen to be interested in a trade, would you?" Rabbit raised an eyebrow, a sliver of mango still dangling from his mouth. "A trade? What kind of trade?" "See, I have this special talent," Hyena began, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I can imitate the call of almost any animal on the savanna perfectly. Think of it. You could use this ability to scare away all sorts of troublemakers, like pesky jackals who might try to steal your vegetables." Rabbit's ears perked up at the mention of jackals. He did have a small vegetable patch near his burrow, and those pesky jackals always seemed to find a way to sneak in and nibble on his carrots. The thought of being able to scare them off with a perfectly imitated lion's roar was certainly tempting. However, Rabbit wasn't one to jump at the first offer. He narrowed his eyes, considering Hyena carefully. "That is an interesting proposal," he said slowly, stalling for time. "But how do I know you won't just use this ability for your own selfish purposes?" Hyena puffed out his chest, trying to appear trustworthy. "Don't worry about that, Rabbit. I wouldn't dream of such a thing. We can make a deal. Some mangoes for a few well-placed animal calls. What do you say?" Rabbit chewed thoughtfully on the last bit of his mango, considering Hyena's offer. The ability to imitate the calls of other animals could be incredibly useful, not just for scaring off pesky jackals, but also for tricking predators or even calling for help. However, Rabbit also knew Hyena's reputation. He wasn't known for his honesty or trustworthiness. "All right, Hyena," Rabbit finally said, wiping the mango juice from his whiskers. "I'm willing to make a deal. But listen closely. You'll teach me 3 different animal calls, your best ones, and in return, you'll get half of the remaining mangoes." Hyena's eyes widened with delight. Half of the remaining mangoes seemed like a small price to pay for such a valuable skill. "Deal," he roared, a little too enthusiastically, causing a flock of startled birds to scatter from a nearby bush. Rabbit chuckled. "Easy there, Hyena. We don't want to attract any unwanted attention just yet." He hopped closer to Hyena, his brown fur blending almost seamlessly with the shade from the mango tree. "Now, let's begin your lesson. First, teach me the mighty lion's roar." Hyena puffed out his chest and took a deep breath. He then let out a sound that was more like a strangled cough than a lion's roar. Rabbit couldn't help but stifle a laugh. Hyena glared at him, his frustration evident. "Hey, that's the best I can do," he protested. "It takes practice to perfect a lion's roar." Rabbit, despite his amusement, knew Hyena was right. He settled down on the ground, his ears perked attentively. Hyena, with a renewed determination, attempted the lion's roar again, this time with slightly better results. Rabbit listened carefully, focusing not just on the sound, but also on the way Hyena positioned his body and opened his mouth. After several attempts, Rabbit finally felt he could replicate the sound with some accuracy. He let out a loud, impressive roar that echoed across the savanna. Birds scattered in fright, and a distant antelope pricked its ears in alarm. Hyena stared at Rabbit, his jaw agape. "Wow, Rabbit! You learned it already. That was almost perfect." Rabbit smiled smugly. "See, Hyena? Sometimes a little cleverness goes a long way." Now, on to lesson 2. Teach me the high-pitched shriek of a startled meerkat. The rest of the morning was spent with Hyena teaching Rabbit different animal calls. Rabbit, a quick learner, mastered each sound with surprising ease. Hyena, on the other hand, enjoyed a steady stream of delicious mangoes, though not quite as many as he had originally hoped for. By midday, the sun hung high in the sky, and both Rabbit and Hyena were feeling full and content. Rabbit now had a valuable new skill, and Hyena had a belly full of mangoes. However, as Rabbit watched Hyena lumber away, a thought struck him. "Hyena," he called out, Hyena stopped and turned, a mango juice stain marring his fur. Remember, these calls are for helping, not for causing trouble. Hyena grinned, his eyes twinkling with mischief. We'll see, Rabbit. We'll see. With that, he turned and disappeared into the tall grass. Rabbit shook his head, a playful smile on his face. He had a feeling this was just the beginning of his adventures with the trickster hyena. He hopped back to his burrow, eager to test out his new skills and see what the rest of the day might bring. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the savanna as Rabbit scurried back to his burrow. His stomach was pleasantly full of sweet mango, and his heart was filled with pride at his newly acquired skills. He couldn't wait to try out the animal calls Hyena had taught him. As he neared his burrow, a low growl reached his ears. He froze, his nose twitching nervously. The unmistakable scent of jackals hung heavy in the air. Rabbit peeked out cautiously from behind a termite mound. There, in his precious vegetable patch, were 3 sly jackals, their eyes gleaming with hunger as they feasted on his carrots. Rabbit clenched his fists. Those pesky jackals! They seemed to have an uncanny knack for finding his vegetables, no matter how well he tried to hide them. But this time, Rabbit had a secret weapon. He took a deep breath and let out a loud, ear-splitting roar. The jackals froze mid-chew. They looked around wildly, searching for the source of the fierce sound. The roar was so realistic, it sounded as if a pride of lions was right around the corner. The jackals whimpered, dropping their stolen carrots and scrambling in a flurry of fur and dust towards the tall grass. Rabbit hopped into his vegetable patch, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. His plan had worked perfectly. The jackals were scared off, and his vegetables were safe, for now. He surveyed the damage, a sigh escaping his lips. The jackals had destroyed quite a few carrots, leaving only a few limp ones remaining. Just then, a booming voice echoed behind him. Well done, Rabbit. That was a mighty roar. I almost believed it myself. Rabbit turned to see Hyena lumbering towards him, a sly grin plastered on his face. Hyena, Rabbit said, surprised. What are you doing here? Just admiring your handiwork, Hyena chuckled. Those jackals won't be bothering you any time soon with that roar of yours. He took a step closer, eyeing the remaining carrots with a glint of hunger in his eyes. Say, Rabbit, those carrots look a little lonely all by themselves. Perhaps they'd enjoy the company of a juicy mango. Rabbit's eyes narrowed. He knew exactly what Hyena was up to. Don't even think about it, Hyena, he said sternly. These are my vegetables, and I earn them. Besides, haven't you had enough mangoes already? Hyena chuckled again, a sound that sent shivers down Rabbit's spine. Maybe just one, he wheedled. Just a small one to celebrate your success against the jackals. Rabbit knew he couldn't stop Hyena with brute force. But maybe, just maybe, he could use his new skills and a little bit of trickery to outsmart the cunning Hyena once again. A mischievous glint flickered in his eyes. "All right, Hyena," he said with a sigh, pretending to give in. "But first, you have to do one thing for me." Hyena's ears perked up. "What is it?" Rabbit pointed towards a nearby bush, his voice filled with urgency. "There, on that branch, a giant, juicy spider. I can't stand spiders. They give me the creeps. Could you please scare it away for me?" Hyena squinted at the bush. He couldn't see anything, but the thought of a giant spider gave him the shivers too. Sure," he mumbled, taking a hesitant step back. "But how?" Rabbit grinned. "Easy," he said. "Just let out the high-pitched shriek of a startled meerkat. Spiders hate that sound." Hyena gulped. The memory of Rabbit mastering the high-pitched shriek of a startled meerkat sent a shiver down his spine. He wouldn't want to be anywhere near a giant spider if it made that sound. But the thought of a juicy mango dangling just out of reach was too tempting to resist. All right," he grumbled. He closed his eyes tight, took a deep breath, and let out a hilariously bad attempt at a meerkat shriek. It sounded more like a strangled yelp than anything else. Rabbit couldn't help himself. He burst out laughing. The sound echoed across the savanna, startling a flock of birds from a nearby tree. Hyena opened his eyes, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Hey, that's the best I could do," he protested. "There's no giant spider there, is there?" "Of course not, Hyena." Rabbit chuckled, wiping a tear from his eye. "There was never a spider. I just wanted to see if you remembered all the animal calls I learned." Hyena scowled, feeling foolish for falling for Rabbit's trick again. But before he could retort, a loud commotion erupted from the tall grass bordering Rabbit's vegetable patch. A group of startled zebras burst out, their hooves pounding the ground in a panicked frenzy. Rabbit and Hyena exchanged a surprised look. Zebras wouldn't be running in such a panic state unless they were being chased by something big. Just then, a powerful roar echoed across the savanna, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. A monstrous lion, its mane a golden halo around its head, emerged from the tall grass, its eyes blazing with fury. The zebras scattered in all directions, desperate to escape the apex predator. The lion, frustrated at his missed prey, turned his gaze towards Rabbit and Hyena, who stood frozen in place, terror gripping their hearts. The lion let out another earth-shattering roar, a sound that seemed to say, "Easy pickings," and began to charge towards them. Rabbit and Hyena may have been rivals, but faced with a common threat, their differences seemed insignificant. They both knew they couldn't outrun a lion. Their only chance of survival was to work together. Panic surged through Rabbit and Hyena. The savanna, once a peaceful haven, now felt like a death trap. The monstrous lion, its golden mane shimmering in the afternoon sun, stalked towards them with a terrifying purpose. Their playful rivalry faded into insignificance compared to the raw fear gripping their hearts. Out there, The zebra's frantic escape was a fading symphony of snorts and pounding hooves. Rabbit, his mind working a mile a minute, glanced at Hyena. Fear was etched on the hyena's face, but there was also a flicker of determination. They couldn't outrun the lion, but maybe, just maybe, they could outsmart it. Hyena! Rabbit squeaked, his voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in his legs. We need a plan. Hyena gulped, his voice barely a whisper. What kind of plan? We're just Rabbit and Hyena, snacks. Not necessarily, Rabbit said, a mischievous glint sparking in his eyes. Remember those animal calls you taught me? Hyena's eyes widened in understanding. The lion's roar? But wouldn't that just attract it more? Not if we use it right, Rabbit said, his voice filled with a desperate hope. We need to distract it, create an opening to escape. Hyena hesitated, fear warring with a newfound trust in Rabbit's quick thinking. All right, he finally said, a tremor in his voice. But what about you? You're much smaller and closer to its path. Don't worry about me, Rabbit said with a reassuring smile, though his heart pounded a frantic rhythm in his chest. Just trust me and follow my lead. Taking a deep breath, Rabbit puffed out his chest and let loose the most ferocious lion's roar he could muster. It echoed across the savanna, a powerful challenge that momentarily startled the charging lion. It skidded to a halt, its head swiveling towards the source of the sound. But Rabbit wasn't done yet. While the lion was momentarily confused, he darted sideways towards a large termite mound, the entrance hidden by tall grass. He knew this area well. A network of tunnels snaked beneath the mounds, offering a potential escape route. The lion, its confusion turning into anger, roared again. It scanned the savanna, searching for the source of the defiant call. Then, it spotted Hyena, standing awkwardly at the edge of Rabbit's vegetable patch, trying to imitate the lion's roar with disastrous results. The lion let out a roar of amused contempt and charged towards Hyena, who yelped in terror and bolted towards the opposite side of the savanna, a clumsy tangle of limbs and fur. The lion, with the bigger prey in sight, gave chase, its powerful leaps sending dust clouds billowing into the air. Rabbit watched the chase unfold from his hiding spot beneath the termite mound. His heart thumped a frantic rhythm against his ribs, but a sense of relief washed over him. Hyena, despite his initial reluctance, had played his part perfectly, drawing the lion's attention away. Now, the question remained, would the network of tunnels offer a safe escape, or would he end up face to face with another predator underground? With a silent prayer, Rabbit plunged into the dark, cool tunnel, his journey towards an uncertain future just beginning. The world shrunk to a suffocating darkness as Rabbit squeezed through the narrow entrance of the termite tunnel. Dust tickled his nose, and earth felt cold and damp against his fur. He scuttled forward, his heart hammering in his chest like a trapped bird. Every rustle, every drip of water, sounded like a hungry predator on his tail. The tunnel twisted and turned, a labyrinth of brown earth and hidden dangers. Memories of playful childhood explorations filled his mind, yet this time, fear was his only companion. How long had he been running? Minutes felt like hours in the inky darkness. Just as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him, a faint glimmer of light flickered ahead. With renewed energy, Rabbit pushed forward, emerging into a small underground chamber. Moonlight peeked through a crack in the ceiling, illuminating a scene that made his fur stand on end. There, in the center of the chamber, sat a figure unlike anything Rabbit had ever seen. It was a creature long and slender, with sleek, glistening scales that shimmered in the moonlight. Its large, intelligent eyes glowed with an eerie luminescence. Coiled around its body were several plump, wriggling creatures that looked suspiciously like Hyena's favorite afternoon snack, mangoes. The creature held one of the mangoes in its long, clawed hand, its sharp teeth bared in a wide, hungry grin. It was a giant pangolin, a solitary creature known for its love of ants and termites, and apparently stolen mangoes. For a moment, Rabbit stood frozen, his mind a whirlwind of panic. He'd escaped the lion, only to find himself face to face with another predator, one that looked decidedly more interested in a snack than a conversation. But then, a mischievous glint sparked in Rabbit's eyes. This pangolin, with its love for mangoes, might just be the key to his escape. He remembered Hyena's earlier offer, a trade of animal calls for mangoes. Could he pull off a similar trick here? Taking a deep breath, Rabbit puffed out his chest and let out a loud, booming call. However, this time, it wasn't a lion's roar. He used the high-pitched, frantic shriek of a startled meerkat, the very same call he'd tricked Hyena with earlier. The pangolin flinched, dropping the mango in surprise. It whipped its head around, searching for the source of the sound. Rabbit seized his chance. He darted past the startled pangolin, snatching the fallen mango in his teeth as he bolted towards another dark tunnel opening at the far end of the chamber. He didn't look back, the terrified shriek of the pangolin echoing behind him. He raced through the tunnel, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Would the tunnels lead him back to the safety of the savanna, or would they bring him face to face with yet another unknown danger? As he ran, a single thought flickered in his mind. He had the stolen mango. Perhaps, just perhaps, this unexpected turn of events might hold the key to not only his own escape, but also to getting revenge on the cunning, mango-loving hyena. The tunnel stretched endlessly before Rabbit, a dark ribbon twisting and turning beneath the earth. His lungs burned, his legs ached, but he dared not slow down. The startled shriek of the pangolin still echoed in his ears, a reminder of the hungry predator left behind. But Rabbit wasn't just running for his life anymore. He clutched the stolen mango tightly in his teeth, a mischievous glint sparkling in his eyes as a plan began to form. This wasn't just an escape attempt anymore. It was an opportunity. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened up into a familiar clearing. Sunlight filtered through tall grasses, painting dappled patterns on the dry earth. Rabbit emerged, panting and exhausted, blinking in the sudden brightness. He was back, but the feeling of relief was short-lived. In the distance, a cloud of dust billowed across the savanna. A low growl, punctuated by frustrated yelps, confirmed Rabbit's worst fear. The lion was chasing Hyena again. The chase seemed relentless, a cruel game where the hunter took pleasure in tormenting his prey. Rabbit watched for a moment, a knot of worry tightening in his stomach. Even though he and Hyena were rivals, he couldn't stand to see him caught. But then, a mischievous grin spread across Rabbit's face. He glanced down at the stolen mango in his teeth, its juicy scent filling his nostrils. Perhaps, just perhaps, he could use this to his advantage. He hopped towards the edge of the clearing, drawing himself up to his full height. He took a deep breath and let out a loud, clear call, the roar of a lion. But this time, it wasn't a desperate attempt to frighten the predator. This time, it was a confident challenge, a call meant to be heard. The chase abruptly halted. The lion, mid-stride, skidded to a stop, its head swiveling towards the source of the unexpected roar. The dust cloud settled, revealing Hyena a few paces ahead, panting and covered in dirt. He looked like a creature on the verge of complete collapse. Then, he saw Rabbit standing at the edge of the clearing, the stolen mango clutched defiantly in his teeth. Hyena's eyes widened in disbelief. "Rabbit? What are you doing?" he wheezed. Ignoring Hyena's question, Rabbit locked eyes with the lion. He puffed out his chest, trying to appear larger than his small stature allowed. He let out another thunderous roar, this one tinged with a hint of authority. For a moment, there was a tense silence. The lion stared at Rabbit, its amber eyes narrowed in suspicion. Then, to Rabbit's immense relief, the lion let out a frustrated roar of its own and turned away. With a powerful leap, it disappeared into the tall grass, leaving the savanna in an unsettling quiet. Hyena, too exhausted to react, simply collapsed onto the ground, his chest heaving with exertion. Rabbit hopped cautiously towards him, the stolen mango still clutched firmly in his teeth. "Well, Hyena," Rabbit said, his voice dripping with amusement. "Looks like you owe me one." Hyena lay sprawled on the hot savanna ground, his tongue lolling out in exhaustion. Every muscle in his body ached, and the sound of his own ragged breaths filled his ears. He squinted at Rabbit, who stood proudly before him, a triumphant glint in his brown eyes and a stolen mango clutched defiantly in his mouth. "You owe me one," Rabbit chirped, his voice barely above a whisper. Hyena let out a weak groan. He knew it was true. Rabbit, the small, seemingly insignificant rabbit, had not only managed to escape the lion's clutches, but had also, somehow, called off the predator. Whether it was sheer luck or a clever trick, Hyena wasn't sure. But one thing was clear: Rabbit had saved his life. He slowly pushed himself off the ground, his legs wobbly like a newborn foal. All right, he grumbled, his voice hoarse. I owe you one. You win, Rabbit. Rabbit tilted his head, a playful smile on his face. He tossed the stolen mango towards Hyena, who caught it clumsily. Consider it a peace offering, Rabbit said, and a reminder that sometimes cleverness can be mightier than brute strength. Hyena took a bite of the juicy mango, the sweet juice momentarily pushing his aches and pains away. He looked at Rabbit, a grudging respect dawning in his eyes. Perhaps there was more to this little rabbit than he'd ever given him credit for. So, Hyena said finally, wiping his mouth with the back of his paw, what do you want in return for saving my hide? Rabbit hopped closer, his whiskers twitching thoughtfully. Well, Hyena, he said, maybe next time, instead of trying to steal my vegetables, we could work together. After all, 2 heads, or a rabbit's brain and a hyena's, other skills are always better than one. Wouldn't you agree? Hyena chuckled, a low rumble that vibrated through the ground. Maybe he conceded. But don't think this makes us friends, Rabbit. We're still rivals, remember? Of course, Rabbit said with a wink. But maybe, just maybe, we can be rivals who help each other out now and then. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the savanna. A sense of peace settled over the land, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the rustle of the wind through the tall grass. Rabbit and Hyena, the unlikely pair, stood side by side, watching the vibrant colors paint the sky. Perhaps their rivalry wouldn't disappear entirely, but today they had learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes the strength you need doesn't come from size or power, but from the unexpected alliances you forge along the way. And who knew? Maybe their adventures together were just beginning.